Hey, it's Les from the TV Dudes. This week, I got to chat with actress, producer, and director Elizabeth Laidlaw. She currently appears in the new series The Red Line. She's also produced and co-directed the web series The Haven. We talk about her career, her interest in Shakespeare, the theater company she founded, as well as her writing process and how she overcomes her inner critic. It's a great interview, goes a little long, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
Hi, Les. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for taking out the time today. I really appreciate it. I've seen the commercials for Thin Red Line, and just last week was
The Red Line. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
It's The Red Line. Yeah, Thin Red Line.
Completely different. Yes,
about 20 years ago.
Yeah, with a time machine and a little luck, you could.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
No.
Yeah. No. It's like the second thing that comes up if you Google The Red Line. So so far that should change, but so far.
Yeah. Give y'all a minute.
Give it a minute.
In seeing the commercials, it both looks very engaging. The commercials look great for it. I actually got to watch it with my dad and stepmom, who are always a wonderful barometer for me in watching anything on TV and kind of getting well, you all watch a different set of stuff than I watch, and if all three of us go, well, that looks cool. It's kind of neat. Can you talk a bit about becoming part of that project, it being set in Chicago, you being from Chicago, kind of how you got involved and what it means to you to get to play Vic Renna?
Yes, I certainly can. So I have known the creators, Caitlin Parrish and Erica Weiss, for quite a long time. We're all theater professionals working here in Chicago. And I knew them, and I liked them a lot, and I always had a good time seeing their shows and chatting with them. And so I had gone to see Twist of Water, which is the play that The Red Line is based on. And this is, I guess 6-7 years ago. I saw this. 6 years ago? Yeah. And I'd seen this production, which just was incredibly moving. I loved it. I mean, there's still lines from that play that I remembered. And the play is a much simpler story. It really just focuses on, the father is not shot by a police officer. He dies of more natural causes, sudden but more natural causes. And he leaves behind a husband and an adopted daughter. And they, it's more, the original play is more a story of coping with grief and rebuilding a life after you lose somebody. And so when I had been in talks with Caitlin and Erica about them hoping to bring something, a TV pilot to Chicago, trying to get something going here. And when they got their pilot picked up and I got to read the script, it was really delightful to see that it was a new version of Twist of Water. And it was this but they had updated it, and they had made it timely, and they had made it very much of the moment, so that, now they had brought in the element of the father being a black physician who was wrongfully shot by a white police officer in case of really, really, really terrible mistaken identity. And that's a phrase right there. It was mistaken. Mistake is the key word. It's mistake. Implicit bias. These are terms that are bandied about in the show, and different characters take a different perspective on what happened. So I thought I was super excited to read the script. I knew they had me in mind with Vic, and so I was incredibly excited about it, and I went into that audition with the main goal of doing Chicago pretty proud and showing anybody who was watching my audition in Los Angeles that Chicagoans can hold their own in that situation. I know we can, but it was important to me to represent and to and I guess I did. So it's wonderful to be able to play, to have a series regular on a show that means so much to me, made by Chicago people, shot in Chicago, surrounded by actors and crew who are all from here. You know, we're a big family here, but we are a really tight and close-knit family, and it's such a pleasure to be able to tell this story at home like this. And it's nice, you know, I mean, I can just drive to work from my home. I don't have to get on a plane and fly somewhere else, so that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, that has to make it nice, especially since I know y'all shot the pilot, then there was a gap of time, and then shot the rest.
Yeah, and every frame was shot here in Chicago, so...
I know a lot of actors stay busy between auditions or between work by taking a bunch of classes or whatever. You seem always on stage or producing something or working on something. Can you talk a bit about what your, I guess, bigger picture schedule looks like across a year between shooting a pilot and being involved in how do you know when to pick a project and when it's going to derail your year?
You don't.
You just take the risk.
If you're just doing theater, it obviously be a little easier to plan because, you know, theater roles are cast typically pretty, you know, kind of months in advance. And, the more television and film that I've kind of added to my schedule over the last 7 or 8 years has sort of changed. I mean, I've had to drop, you know, I've been scheduled to perform in plays and then had to drop out because a film role came along. Sometimes it lines up beautifully. So far this year, everything has been lining up really nicely. But, you know, as an actor, that changes. You don't know, and you just have to keep, if you get an audition for something and it's something you want to work on, you go to that audition, you do your best, hopefully everything works out. I think I'm being a little bit wiser about, you know, what I'm choosing to go out for, you know what I mean? And what I'm choosing to sort of line myself up, like kind of I'm aware of, you know, like auditioning for this thing and might work out better with all the other stuff I'm going on because of the timing. But it's, you know, it's not easy. It's always crazy. I just think that I've been fortunate that a lot of things have been timing out pretty nicely for me so far. You never know when that's going to change. When I got approached to direct this play, it was a situation where they approached me in September. I was in the middle of, you know, just starting to shoot the rest of the Red Line series, and they said, "Oh, this will start in mid-December, and you know, we'll just start rehearsing in mid-December and then open in February." And I thought, well, that works great because we're going to finish Red Line in early December. And then the Red Line schedule got pushed forward almost a week. And instead of having like 10 days between jobs, I ended up having 2. So I came down, I was in the last shot of Red Line. On the very last day, I was in the very last shot we did. And then I had like 36 hours to recover from an all-night shoot and then start rehearsals. So that got a little tight. And then we were concerned that there might be reshoots. We sort of had a game plan in place. I had an assistant and an associate director who were kind of ready to jump in if I had to miss a few days, you know, so we could keep that play, kind of like keep the things rolling until I could come back to it. Fortunately, we didn't end up having to do any reshoots, so that worked out well. But like I said, that's just things working out. You know, it's kind of not in my control.
Yeah. It kind of sounds like the career version of watching your connecting flight get closer and closer to your delayed plane you're on, and like, okay, it's fine. I'll run a 4-minute mile and we'll be good. And you know. Yeah,
it's a really good analogy. It's a really good analogy. Yeah, it's like that. It's very much like that. But you know, it's the life we chose. I mean, if I wanted a life that was predictable, there's other things I could have done.
Yeah, no, busy is a wonderful problem to have. I had seen in your bio that you had gotten into theater early. You'd done high school theater and had wanted to be serious about it from a young age, it seems. I saw that you had kind of gotten to be assistant director whenever there kind of wasn't a role for you in the school production. Can you talk a bit about when you kind of first got enamored with the whole works of the story that's happening on stage? I feel like when I was a kid, I saw the possessory credit at the start of movies and just kind of pictured, Kubrick running around with a bunch of worker bees, just yelling commands at them, and no one else knowing anything about it. And now I really understand that it is a lot more of a kind of an invitation to collaborate whenever you make a movie or make a play.
Yeah, I mean the best ones are, I think.
Yeah. Do you remember when you kind of first got struck by the bigger than the sum of its parts kind of feeling that good theater can have when the whole thing clicks?
I had a couple of, and they are young experiences. I had not really thought to even I didn't volunteer to be the assistant director. Our Dr. Edward Wingler, we called him Doc Wingler. He ran the drama department when I was in high school, and he was a real character, of course, very exacting. He demanded a lot of us as kids. We were kid actors, but he would bring us Edward Albee plays, and like whatever had just played on the West End that summer, he would like bring that and say, "Okay, we're going to do this really challenging, difficult play." And he was going to do a production of Zoo Story, which is 2 male characters, and he cast two young guys, really talented young guys in the art production. Oh, and before that, another play called Not About Heroes. Again, these are not like kids shows. And they both had male casts, and I kind of got in his face a little bit about it, saying, why don't you do more shows so more of the women in the department can work? And he promptly said, well, why don't you be my artistic director or my assistant director and see if you can tell me how to do my job, which was like a very, sort of, it was an affectionate challenge, and I think he saw in me something that I hadn't even tapped into yet. And both of those situations were really fruitful for me, and he took me very seriously, and he would turn to me and ask me, well, what do you think? And it sort of put me on the spot, and I had to respond, and I found I really enjoyed it. And I wanted to stay connected to my theater department, so I was always volunteering. If I wasn't in a show, I ran lights for one. I played a lot of great roles as well, so I was kind of bouncing around all over the place. And I think I may have been too young to really realize this at the time, but by the time I got to college, I knew that I loved being a storyteller. And the other useful experience I wanted to point to was I had worked with a community kids theater director, and her name is Carolyn Thomas Davidoff. She was Carolyn Thomas at the time, and she began a traveling children's theater company, and she sort of brought a bunch of us with her, and we would put together, she would do these adaptations of famous stories. We did Peter Pan, and she did adaptations of other famous fairy tales and stories, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And we would go around to elementary and high schools and perform these productions, real traveling, itinerant kind of theater. Like we'd pack everything in a couple of crates, and we'd get up and we'd go to some school on a Saturday morning. And we really felt a part, even though she was the director and she was the organizer, she was the adult in the room. It was a very collaborative experience, and she really allowed us to, we took a lot of pride in helping to create these plays with her, and helping to bringing our stuff and setting it up and taking it down. It was a real community, and I loved that. And I think I've persisted in sort of creating working communities around myself, because I really enjoy making theater, and I enjoy all aspects of it. I like being off, sometimes I like, at this point in my life, I almost like being a director or a creative director or producer more than being an actor, even though I love being an actor. But I don't know, the other jobs kind of challenge and scare me more at this stage of my life. So I like to do things that scare me.
I know you have an interest in Shakespeare, and both studying it overseas, starting Shakespeare Company Lakeside in Michigan. I remember not necessarily being shown Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet in high school. I remember sneaking out under the cover of darkness during that movie and skipping that class.
Right.
And it wasn't really until college, I think, that I had a roommate who all the Brennan movies were out and the Mel Gibson Hamlet was out, and he took great joy in showing these different, like, no, man, let me explain this joke to you, and then we'll watch this other version, and I'll show you how it's not a joke in this one. They play it straight,
Right.
and I kind of got to finally see. I then got to take some classes in Shakespeare and stuff in college, but I got to see that kind of deeper magic to those plays of how they work in almost any time, and how many different ways you can edit and reinterpret these things. Do you remember when it first clicked for you that wow, there's really this is great, more than just people constantly handing you Shakespeare going, this is great?
Yeah. I think, well, I loved it, and I think I knew from a pretty young age that I was well suited to become, to study classical acting, and I'm quite tall. I have a pretty, powerful voice. I've never had a problem. No one's ever been like, oh, we can't hear you. That's literally never a note I've gotten before. I had sort of it's interesting as I get older, I realize we all as actors sort of pigeonhole ourselves a little bit, and we allow kind of voices around us to pigeonhole us a little bit. And I was really being pushed towards classical theater, and I did have a knack for it. So I think I got handed a lot of Shakespeare, and because I like to know what I'm saying, I like to be good at what I'm doing, I really dug down into it. I always tried to make sure I understood what I was talking about and understood how to interpret the text, and that became very important to me as a technician, to sort of do my job well. And by virtue of that, I became quite fascinated with the density of these plays, and he was presenting psychological profiles of complicated people before the word or the concept of psychology existed, which is really fascinating. I mean, yes, we can apply a contemporary lens to what he was doing, but there's no way around the fact that particularly his monologues, like that Macbeth and Hamlet and Richard II do, these monologues are deep, probing, soul-searching questions. Like, why am I doing this? Where am I at? How do I get to the next place? What is my mind doing right now? And how can I survive this moment? And that it's hard to imagine a world where psychology didn't exist, but it didn't. And yet he was having these characters psychologically reach down and examine themselves. And there's just so many opportunities within those plays to kind of dig into that psychology, and there's so much room for interpretation that I became really fascinated with all the different ways you could tell these stories. I'm particularly fascinated with how you can apply them, put a modern lens on them. I'm not, I think there's plenty of people doing really, really, I guess, quote unquote, historically accurate renditions of these plays, bearing in mind that most of Shakespeare's plays were either set in times long before he lived, or only a few of his plays are actually contemporary to his time. The rest of them are set in like magical places that didn't exist, or, kings long dead, or, ancient Rome, or, so there's no real, you can't really historically accurately, you can do a production that represents the time Shakespeare was writing in, but that isn't necessarily accurate to the actual story. So there's a lot of fun in being able to contemporize these stories and bring them a little closer to the audience's immediate experience in order to sort of connect with them. And that I find that really interesting. I like to do that with these shows.
Do you have a favorite or craziest time shift or location shift you've ever seen a Shakespeare play done?
I think. I've seen. I loved well, one of the things we did with that my company did, we had a lot of fun. I had a lot of trouble with the play Merry Wives of Windsor.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I don't like this play. It drives me crazy. It's so contrived. It's so this. And then we set it in a kind of I Love Lucy, 1950s sitcom world. And I think that's one of my favorites. It's because it answered the problem of, I was like, oh, this is like a classic American sitcom. Like if you make this like a broad slapstick American sitcom from the 50s or 60s, all of a sudden this play solves itself. You know what I mean? All of a sudden it makes sense. And and then again you realize that there's this connective tissue between modern entertainment and what Shakespeare was doing, and that's a lot of fun. So I guess that was a favorite because it was a discovery for me on how to handle some of these more difficult texts, or if you found the right place to put it, all of a sudden it started to make sense. That's one that I can think of off the top of my head.
There's an interview I read with you. It was either with Chicago Tribune or Indie Activity. There's an article about you where you talked about trying to play the word on the page. Is this good for the story? I'm in the middle of editing a thing right now, and it seems like step one of every day of sitting down to it is don't take this personally. Is this good for the story? And just separate yourself and work from the notes and solve the problem. And the Shakespeare story kind of brings up that similar thing. When you're frustrated trying to make the character on the page fit you because what they're saying doesn't make sense or is stupid or you don't like it. Have you had a favorite role you've gotten to play where you had that aha moment of, I get this person now. I see it. That's not typoed on the page. That is what she'd say. I had a really, really challenging time. I played Coriolanus a couple of years ago, a couple summers ago. That's a very difficult play. It really lacks Shakespeare's typical lyricism. Coriolanus is a really complicated character, and it was originally written also as a male character, and I played Coriolanus as a female character, but still playing a war general and somebody who was, this is a really complicated person, and it was one of those times when I thought, I'm not going to get this. I don't know why they're saying this. I don't know why this person is saying the things that she's saying. I don't know why I'm doing this. And I, again, to quote myself, quoting myself, I had to remind myself to go back to the drawing board. What am I saying? Why do I stop speaking at this moment and then change gears and start speaking about this? Why do I change subjects here? Why does this happen? And if you really force yourself as a technician to go line by line by line and say, okay, this is why I do this. Because if this thought follows this thought, then the motivation for what I'm doing lies in there. So you have to figure out, you have to do sort of the deductive reasoning. Why would they say these things? And that's where the character starts to kind of, and these little colorations and shadings start to add up to a person. And I think that whether it's Shakespeare or certainly when it's a modern, sometimes you have a tough time. Sometimes you get handed a bad script. I've been lucky. I haven't had to deal with too many bad scripts. But sometimes you get handed a bad script and sometimes you just gotta make stuff up, like you're like, well, these are the words. So sometimes you're in a situation where it's a new script and it's not a bad script, but it's new and it needs work, and you can collaborate with the director and the writer and try to make a better line, or make things make a little bit more sense. You can have that conversation. Sometimes you're not in that position. Sometimes the playwright has said, no, I'm not changing another word, and you have to make it make sense. And I think there's almost always a way to do that if you say the words on the page in the order they're written. If you would, most playwrights worth their salt don't punctuate arbitrarily. Most writers they're writing the way they hear it in their mind. So you have to sort of, if you say it the way they wrote it, then you can start to hear perhaps what they're thinking, and that serves as your map, your road map. Like this is the way you need to go. So
I try not to fight that until it becomes imperative that I do fight it. And I try to let the text tell me as much as it possibly can before I challenge it, if there's an opportunity to challenge it. And sometimes there isn't, you know?
Yeah. Can you talk a bit about the Haven web series and shifting into more of a producer and director role? I mean, it seems like such a natural extension of the grander scheme that you already enjoy about your career. How did you get involved in that kind of backside of the industry?
Well, I've been, like as you know, I had been an artistic director for the theater company for many years already at this point. Mm-hmm. And so part of being an artistic director is definitely being a producer. It's a different kind of production, like the things you have to do are different, but sort of the job is quite similar. You got to make sure that you get the money and everybody shows up in the right spot and all the things, all the things, both physical and ephemeral, like get to the right place at the right time. So I was pretty experienced with that at that point. And also being an artistic director is also being like a creative producer, sort of being kind of the person who decides the season and decides sort of the, kind of sort of the overall sense of like how we're going to cast things and how we're going to, and advises the directors on, I would always read the director's cuts of the scripts first and, kind of give notes and say, so it's not that different. So I've been doing it for a while, and making the jump from theater to doing it on film was if you're smart and you're starting something new for the first time, you get a lot of people around you who know their jobs pretty well, which we certainly did. So what happened was that Mia McCullough, who's the writer of The Haven, and I had collaborated on a number of projects prior. She and I had done a new play together, a new play of hers, and I played the lead role in it, and we had a very collaborative experience with our director, Jesse Hill, and we kind of created this world premiere. And so she and I worked together really well. We enjoyed working together, and I got involved in a couple of other like staged readings of other things she was working on, and always gave her feedback. And then we decided to collaborate on a short film because an opportunity arose for us to be able to do that. That would be like funded by an educational institution. So we jumped on board with that. And we'd had a lot of conversations about being very frustrated that very little content was being created here and this is all pre-Redline. It's very funny, it kind of all happening at the same time, because our conversations about how a lot of work, like there were no writers' rooms in Chicago. And, they were all, if you wanted to be in a writer's room, you had to be in LA. Mm-hmm. And they so typically cast the lead roles and the series regular roles and the major recurring roles and the guest star roles. They cast all of those out of LA or New York or London, and then the Chicago talent pool was largely being used for day players and walk-on parts and smaller parts, and sometimes they were recurring, but that was like a huge score for a lot of Chicago actors as opposed to it. And that there was just a conceit that existed in casting all of these shows that are being shot here that those kinds of roles go to the LA people. And we were both feeling a lot of frustration about that. So we were like, well, you know what? We've got digital now. It's easier, it's cheaper to make things in a lot of ways. There are new contracts coming out, so let's make something. So she'd originally written a pilot that was for The Haven. It was an hour-long pilot. And we decided the way to get it made, because she was like, I don't want to shop this around. It might get picked up. Somebody might buy it, but then they're going to go take it away and they're going to shoot it somewhere else and they're not going to hire Chicago people, and I want to make it here. So we started talking about, right? Like it was a great script. So she's like, somebody's going to buy it and they're going to take it away and we'll never see it again. And so we decided to she broke it up and she kind of expanded some episodes, and we basically broke it up into 4 pieces, and then it ends up being a little longer than an hour now because it's 4 episodes. rewritten and retooled to work as 4 distinct stories. And we raised the money, all, begged, borrowed, and stole. And, well, we didn't steal anything, but definitely begged, definitely borrowed. We found a lot of really great women who were in production to help us out. We had Megan St. John was our UPM, and Grace Hahn was our associate producer. Grace Hahn loves filling out paperwork, which there's a ton of paperwork on a SAG production. And Grace takes great joy in that, and nobody else does. So we were like, yay, we got somebody who likes to do this. We found, women to run and helm all the departments, design, the design elements, camera. We found, we directed an episode. We had 2 other women directors directing an episode. So, and we just pulled it together. We couldn't shoot it all at once, so we shot it in like blocks. We would take a week and shoot one, and then we would kind of go away and raise some more money and get everybody back together, and then we'd shoot another. And we managed to shoot them all actually before we started shooting Redline, which was great. Like, that was done and in the can, and we could just worry about editing at that point. And then I guess this is sort of a long story. That's how that all came about. But I just started to apply the things I'd learned being an artistic director and a director of theater, and my experiences. I was a recurring character on Boss, and at one point I just flat out asked Peter Giuliani if I could shadow an episode that I wasn't in, because I was in, I think, 4 or 5 episodes out of that season, out of 8. And so I chose an episode that I wasn't going to be in, and I got to shadow the full 16 days, which is a really fabulous experience. I was in the locations van, and then I was just on the set and just, sneaking over to people, and they're like, what did you just do there? What was that you just did? Why did you do that?
Yes.
And I really enjoyed talking to like a script supervisor on that set, because that's the person, like, the most underappreciated human on a set is the script supervisor, who like keeps everything. So that was the first thing I said on our set. I was like, listen, nobody ever hires a script supervisor. You have to have a script supervisor when you're doing a low budget project. They're even more important than on an expensive project.
Yeah.
And so I got to sort of kind of a hands-on experience back then. I brought that to our production, and we made mistakes. We solved them. We figured them out. I got, the thing that I'm still learning is how to storyboard and frame a shot. I think that's my last step in terms of becoming an on-camera director that I can really improve upon. Because I can lead a room, and I can problem solve, and I can make decisions, and even I can be even slightly overconfident when it's needed, and sometimes it is. Like, sometimes as a leader, as a director, as a producer, you have to be like, all right, this is what we're doing. We're going to do this, and if you're going to be wrong and strong.
Yeah.
And because people don't want indecisiveness from you, so that's something I can bring to bear. But I also like to really collaborate, and I like to. I think a good asset as a director or artistic director or a producer is to be able to feel the room and bring the room together towards the goal, feel where everybody's at, kind of guide it to where it wants to go, and to be sensitive to that. So that's my experience so far. Again, I really want to learn more about setting up shots, and I really followed our DP on Redline, Kira Kelly, who's wonderful DP. Her stuff is so beautiful. And I kind of hid behind her whenever I had an opportunity, and I'd be like, why are you doing this? And she's lovely about explaining things. So.
That's great. Well, thank you for letting me take up so much of your time. I could seriously chat up the rest of your evening. This stuff is so interesting.
Thank you. It sounds like you're a writer. You're a writer.
Yes.
Not just a journalist, but you're also writing other stuff.
Yes.
Do you write narratives?
I just wrote a pilot. I don't have really anything to do with it right now, but it's written, and so now we're editing it because that's what you do.
Yep, that's what you do.
And so yeah, it's been really fun, kind of moving through these steps. I'd ghostwritten stuff like narrative fiction for people before, but there's weirdly no stakes in that. It's just kind of bad contract pay.
Yeah.
But your name's never on it, and there's just no stakes.
Well, that's true. Boy, putting you like I'm working on a script right now, and I just want to finish it and hand it to somebody, and then say, please just read it, and
Yeah,
it's probably awful. Just tell me, but it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. I have to stopping myself. I'm writing, and I think, oh, that's stupid, and then I'm like, no, just finish the scene, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Go back and you can rewrite it later. So that's a hump I'm trying to get over, because you get very self-conscious.
Yeah. I don't need this to be the funniest joke in the world. I just need it to I need it to actually be structurally sound, so that I don't have to rewrite the whole thing later.
Right.
Yeah.
Just get the first draft. That's all I'm trying to do right now, is just get it written and stop judging myself and work it out later. Because, again, you write it and somebody looks at it and your name is on it, and you're like, I lay claim to it. Oh, ooh.
Yeah, it's so hard to take that first, okay, deep breath. None of what is about to happen is personal. I am not any of these people in this story. We're gonna do whatever makes this 3-act scaffolding come together strongest, or whatever you're building.
But you have to combine that with also, the maxim of write what you know, right? I mean, when you are a writer, every character is a little bit you, every character is part of, they're all coming from you. They're all coming from your experience. They do, somebody's going to read it and be like, this character here, this person kind of resembles so-and-so. Is it based on that? And you're like, no.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, it kind of.
Yeah, that's always a fun conversation of okay, everybody, I'm going to skirt real close to things that have happened to all of us, and I may have characters stop at points that none of you would no, we didn't blow our lives up, because I don't want to live in that world, but it is way more interesting. So I am going to have this character blow their lives up.
This version is, well, and in scripts, people get to say things that you said really well in your car before you had the real conversation with the person. Like, the real conversation never went the way you wanted it to, but in the script, you can make it go exactly the way you want it to.
Yeah. Or vice versa. Did you really, is that what you really wanted to say? No, I just thought it would have sounded cool if I wanted to blow my life up.
Yeah. Yep. That's an interesting thing.
Well, I can't wait to see what you get to do next, and I'm going to have to make time to sit and watch The Haven now.
Oh, please do. It will be, a week from tomorrow. It'll be available on Open TV.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So, but they have the exclusive streaming rights for us for now. So, So we were going to put it on our website, and then they have a better distribution platform. So we were like, yes,
yep.
you guys do it. So
you guys invent that wheel. That's great.
They're based
I said, y'all can invent that wheel. We don't have to figure out streaming platform.
Yeah, well, they're a cool organization, actually. They're based here in Chicago, but obviously it's streaming, so you can get it anywhere. And they primarily, the platform is designed to present stories for marginalized performers and voices and storytellers. So they really focus, like Sam Bailey, who's directing Brown Girls for HBO.
Okay.
The original, she's a Chicagoan as well. I've known her a long time. The original version of Brown Girls was a web series on Open TV, and then it's how she was able to get national attention to her work. So it's a pretty cool opportunity, because it's making opportunities for people who might not be able to get into the right rooms otherwise. People who should be. So it's pretty cool organization.
I was just speaking to somebody last week, Alan Maldonado, about short films and streaming platforms for short films, so that they don't just vanish off of festival circuits when they're done. And that as a pipeline towards feature development, or towards new director talent development. Yeah. So it's kind of nice to see this wave of new technology settle into something,
useful.
Kind of grander. Yeah. better than just the VHS camera that I shot dumb stuff on in the backyard in high school.
Yeah. Yeah. I let go a lot of those old VHS tapes that I had lying around. It was time. I was like, you don't need to save that stuff anymore.
Yeah. I think the last time I was home, my mom just had a box and was like, "That's the box. I'm not throwing it away, but get it out of my house." I'm like, okay, it's just a bunch of weird high school stuff. Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Loved talking to you. I look forward to, and I liked checking out your other interviews when I got the memo about this. So I'll look forward to, I'll be paying attention.
Oh, wonderful.
Now that we know each other.
Yeah. Have a great rest of your night.
Okay.
Bye.
The TV Dudes is an independently run podcast and a member of the Electric Sweater Podcast Network. We are exclusively listener-supported. If you'd like to help us out, go to patreon.com/tvdudes. You can like us on Facebook and Twitter @TVDudes. All the music for our show is by our friend and original TV dude, Gregory J. Amani Smith. To find out more about us, go to thetvdudes.com and electricsweater.com. I'm Grant Davis. Thanks for listening.